In the 1st century AD, Pompeii was a prosperous economic hub on the Bay of Naples. It sat on incredibly fertile volcanic plains, giving its citizens a thriving agricultural economy. It also sat directly beneath a magma reservoir 3 kilometers wide, held back by a thick plug of hardened rock. We know exactly how the locals viewed this landscape. This is a fresco recovered from a domestic shrine in Pompeii. It shows the mountain, lush and covered in vineyards, with Bacchus standing to the side. To the Romans, the mountain was a provider of wealth and high-quality crops. The Latin language of the time had no specific word for volcano. To the residents of Pompeii, Vesuvius was simply a mons, a mountain. The Greek geographer Strabo had previously noted that the summit looked eaten by fire, but because it had been dormant for hundreds of years, it was regarded as extinct. This linguistic and scientific gap meant that the smoke and tremors were seen as isolated events rather than symptoms of a terminal threat. Without a conceptual framework for a volcanic eruption, the population had no way to interpret the signals of the disaster before it arrived. 17 years before the eruption, a massive magnitude 5 to 6 earthquake struck the region. It caused severe structural damage throughout Pompeii and the neighboring town of Herculaneum. The devastation was recorded by the Romans themselves. This marble bas-relief, found in the home of a Pompeian banker, depicts the exact effects of that quake. You can see the city's Temple of Jupiter tilting as its foundations fail. Modern geologists recognize this event as a direct precursor to the eruption. At the time, the philosopher Seneca concluded that the tremors were caused by trapped air rushing through subterranean cavities. The seismic shock was viewed as a local nuisance, entirely disconnected from the rising magma chamber. Instead of retreating, the citizens repaired the damage and expanded. Politicians financed the reconstruction of temples to secure political favor, and the city began building a new state-of-the-art bath complex, taking up an entire city block. This normalization of seismic activity locked the population into place. By the time the final tremors grew stronger in AD 79, the residents of Pompeii had spent nearly 2 decades habituated to a shaking earth, and they felt no urgent need to evacuate. At 1 p.m. on August 24, groundwater interacted with the ascending magma body. This reaction shattered the old volcanic plug, initiating a gas-driven explosion that projected molten rock and pulverized debris vertically into the atmosphere. This vertical plume, known as a plinian column, reached 30 kilometers high. Pliny the Younger observed it spreading out like an umbrella pine. High-altitude winds pushed this expanding cloud southeast over Pompeii, beginning a 12-hour continuous rain of pumice stones. The accumulation was massive, reaching a depth of nearly 3 meters across the city. This stratigraphy clearly shows the white pumice layer from the start of the eruption, followed by a denser layer of gray pumice as the magma chamber reached deeper, evolved phonolithic material. As the stones rained down and roof tiles heated to over 120 degrees Celsius, many residents sought shelter indoors to protect their property and wait out the storm. This behavioral choice became a lethal mechanical trap. The immense weight of the accumulating pumice caved in roofs and blocked exit doors from the outside, locking the population inside their homes. In the early morning hours of the second day, the physical dynamics of the volcano shifted. Magma discharge peaked, and the towering eruptive column lost upward momentum, collapsing under its own weight. The collapsing column generated pyroclastic density currents, avalanches of superheated gas and rock exceeding 100 miles per hour. The fourth surge possessed such kinetic energy, it overtopped Pompeii's fortifications, traveling at 104 kilometers per hour at nearly 300 degrees Celsius. Early excavations suggested the victims died of slow suffocation from ash. However, bioanthropological data points to a much faster mechanism. Thermal modeling indicates that exposure to these temperatures causes immediate denaturation of proteins and vital organs. This heat shock causes a rapid systemic collapse in a fraction of a second before asphyxiation can occur. Near the base of the mountain at Herculaneum, the surges reached 500 degrees Celsius. The heat was so extreme that it vitrified human brain tissue, transforming it into black glass before the skull could even collapse. The volcanic engine was designed for annihilation. Phase 1 mechanically immobilized the victims, and Phase 2 delivered an inescapable thermal shock. Pompeii was erased from the map, sealed under meters of hardened volcanic ash for nearly 2,000 years. By the mid-19th century, archaeologists began discovering hidden voids in the compacted ash. The flesh and bone of the victims had decomposed, leaving behind hollow, highly detailed cavities in the earth. In 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli began injecting liquid plaster into these negative cavities. Once the plaster hardened and the surrounding ash was removed, the exact shapes of the victims at their moment of death were preserved. These casts record the pugilistic attitude, characterized by flexed limbs and arched backs. This posture is caused by extreme heat triggering instantaneous dehydration and muscle contraction at the exact fraction of a second of death. Through the Fiorelli process, Pompeii was transformed from an archaeological site into an unprecedented forensic repository of Roman life. Modern researchers have expanded this investigation, applying cutting-edge medical technology to the ancient site. CT scans can now peer through the 19th century plaster to analyze the pristine skeletons locked inside. These scans provide data on age, diet, and health that Fiorelli could never have imagined. These casts represent the exact negative space occupied by human beings in their final moments. Each prone or defeated posture is a direct physical recording of a real person trapped by forces they did not understand. The destruction of Pompeii demonstrates that a civilization's survival depends on its scientific comprehension of the natural world. This tragedy was the result of a systemic failure. A long period of seismic habituation and a missing word for the threat allowed a thriving city to sleep soundly inside an active thermal trap.